build this project in C++. This is a program that hardware might use as an invoice for a sold item at the store. Now we'll be building this today. So today we will be building this project in C++. So yeah, let's get started. So now this is our program. I already written the program, so I'm just gonna go through each line and explain what's going on. Now it is just a definition or the program description. As I said, that is a program that a hardware store might use to represent an invoice for a sold item at a store. Now in this program, we'll be using classes. We will have our data members and the mutators. Then we go on to defining our main function to demonstrate the capabilities of this class, which is the invoice. Now let's start on the first line here. Or first, we have to include our input-output stream there, then using our namespace standard. Then we start by defining our invoice class. Now, our invoice class have 4 data members. That is 4 private data members to be precise. These are the data members, and here we have other public members, which are only the mutators, that is the setters and getters, and one function here to compute the invoice amount. Now, here we those data members, we have 2 string data members. That is, we have a part number and a description. The part number can another thing here I must highlight is that it is very important that when you write or when you name your variables, that it is very important that you use the full names. As you can see here, that this is a part number, it's for storing a part number, and this one is for a description, this one is for a quantity, and this one is a price. Now the quantity is an integer, since we're only dealing which is only the number of items, so it has to be an integer. Then here we have a float, since we're talking about the price, so money has some decimals, so it has to be a float, or we can use a double, but we'll be using a float here. Now moving on to our public members. Now we have first one is a default constructor. Now this constructor is for initializing those 4 data members. Here will be used, the constructor will be used to initialize those data members. Now we have the set function for the part number, which takes a string and it returns nothing. So we move on to a set function for the part description, which is a set part description. You can see the naming here. It's self-explanatory that this is a set part number. You can see, you can just tell, but you can just tell this function will set a part number, bring a part, and it returns a void. Now we also have a setter for the quantity, which is an integer. Another thing we should note here is that the set function here is since it takes an integer, we have to validate the integer. That is, if the quantity that the user will provide, in fact, the quantity has to be greater than 0. You cannot order items which is less than 0. It's either they are 0, that is you don't order anything at all, or you order something that is above 0. So you cannot order an item which is less than 0. That is, this function will have some validation before it assigns the quantity that the user will input. Now you can see on this line here that if the item, that is, if this item quantity is less than 0, then it should print an error message. Then this quantity must be set to 0. Then otherwise, that is if the quantity is greater than 0 or equals to 0, then the quantity value will be set. Now this function takes an integer parameter, then it returns nothing, it returns a void. Now we also have a set price per item. Now the price per item, also money, there has to be some conditions here, because we're talking money. The money cannot be less than 0. So if the money is less than 0, then the error message must be printed to the screen, so the user so the user will know what happens or what mistake the user did. So then the price should be set to 0. Then Otherwise, if the price is greater than zero, then the price will be setted. Then, as you can see, this function takes sorry, it has to be a float, not an integer. It takes a float. Yeah, it takes a float parameter. Now, then it also returns a void. Now we have our getters. Now this is a getter for a part number. You can see just the naming and the camel casing. It is very important that you follow these standards, that when you name your function, you use a camel casing. That is, the first letter is always a small letter. Then if you want to separate your names, since you don't use you don't have if since you don't use the spaces, you can use your underscore, or instead you can use underscore, or instead you can just the first letter of the other word, you can just use it. You can just use the capital letter. You can see get part number. So yeah, so that you make it easy for someone. Let's say if you're not working alone in your project, then it might complicate things, where when you're keeping someone else to work on your class, then you find that the naming is a bit, so a bit ugly, if I may say so. So yeah, now, if you are okay, we also have a getter here for a part description. We have a getter for a quantity. We have a getter for a price per item. We have a getter for an invoice. Now, this one here returns the. You can see the return types here. This one returns a string. This one returns since a part number is a string. Therefore, the function has to return a string. Since description sorry, since the description is a string, so the function has to return a string. Now, we also have a quantity, which is an integer, because the quantity, since I said it's a number of items, it's an integer. Then, so our get has to return an integer. Now, the price is a float. Now, the function has to return the float, the same as the get invoice amount, because this one will compute the total amount that the user is gonna buy the items for. Now, the get invoice amount computes the amount using this formula, which is actually this price stage. It's actually quantity times the price per item. So this is how this method will work. So it returns this amount as a float value, floating point values. Now we will move on to the implementation now of those functions that I've just defined here. So we have those functions, which is the mutators for those data members. And then we only have another function here for computing this what's called the invoice amount. So now let's move on to those to the implementation part now of these functions. Now remember, here I'm not gonna split the code into three separate files. Of course, it is very important that when you write your program, you split your codes. That is, the function, the class goes to the header file, and the implementation goes to the implementation file. Then the third file will be our application, that is the main file. So, but in this tutorial, I'm not gonna separate the files. But if you have any problem in separating the files, you can just leave a comment, then I'll be glad to attend to your queries in the comment section. Maybe if you have something, I'll show you. Maybe have a video for that. Yeah. So now let's get started on the on the implementation part. Now, let's start on the first method here, which is the constructor. Constructor, of course, there's no return type, and it's of type invoice. It's defined in the invoice class. So you know that when you're implementing your functions outside the class, you use the scope resolution operator that is referencing your function to the class. So this this actually says that our invoice, this constructor belongs to this class. That's all it means. Now, as I said that this invoice class will be used to initialize our data members. You can see here we initialized our part number to an empty string, our part description to an empty string, our quantity to an 0, our price per item to 0. Now this one is initialized to an empty string because of type string, and this also is type of string. It's all type of string, so it's initialized to an empty string. Quantity is an integer, therefore initialized to 0. Then the price per item initialized to 0. Now we all do this because that whenever we instantiate an object of this class, we want those members to be initialized this way. That is why we do this. Now we move on to our another function, which is the set part number, which is return type. It's a void. It returns void. That means it returns nothing. It just do what it does. Then now it takes a string, which is the part number, then assigns the part number to the data member. And now we move on to the set description. Now, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this, that whenever you define your classes, or whenever you implement a function outside the class, you must use the scope resolution operator and the class. That is you have your return type, your class, the scope resolution operator, and the method. But here, since we know that the constructor has no return type, therefore do not have a return type. We only have this class name, the scope resolution operator, and our constructor. That is to say that this constructor belongs to this class. Now here, since this parameter, since the set part number function has the return type, which is the void, now we have our void class number, class name, the scope resolution operator, and the class. The function name as it defined in the class. You must not change anything here. Now we move on to, this is a setter. Now we're setting here the part number. Now here we set the part number. Now here we set the part description. Here we set the quantity. As I said earlier, that whenever we set the quantity, we must validate first that we must check if the user, we must make sure in fact that the user enters a number that is greater than 0, because you cannot order items that are less than 0. You cannot say give me the -5 hammers, so it has to be greater than 0. So whenever the user enters a number, a quantity that is less than 0, this error message should be printed to the screen. Now that this error message will be printed to the screen, the quantity must be set to 0. Invoice data members must be modified. Therefore, that is, the quantity will be set to 0. Then, otherwise, the quantity will be set. Now we're moving on to the set price per item, which takes a float. Now here we also must validate that we want to make sure that the user enters a price that is greater than 0. If the price is less than 0, then this error message will be printed and the price will be set to 0. Now otherwise the price will be set. That is the amount that the user enters will be set to the price per item. Now we have the getters. Now the get part number, it returns the part number. The get part description, it returns the part description. The get quantity, it returns the quantity, which is an integer quantity. Now this get invoice amount, or this get price per item, it also returns the price per item. You also have the get invoice amount, which I said earlier that it computes the total amount, that is using this formula, which is the quantity times the price per item, then returns it. Now we have here, now we will start our main function to demonstrate the capabilities of our invoice class. Now we have our main function. Now in our main function we have the declaration here. Here we declare all the variables. So we have our 44. How many of those variables here? We have 5. About 5. The first one is an object of class invoice. So we're using this one. We will be using this one for accessing our members of Invoice, all those members. In fact, public members of Invoice of class Invoice. Now we have the part number for storing. And then for getting the part number, we have the part description. For also getting the part description, we have an integer item quantity. For getting the quantity, we have a price per item. Now we're moving on to for moving on to this part, which is the user inputs. Now here we're requesting the user inputs here and setting them. Now the first one, we request for a part number, then we insert the part number. We request a part description, we insert the part description. We request the quantity, then insert the quantity. We request the user to enter the price per item, then we set the price per item. Then these are all the data that we need for this invoice. Now, after this all input, we want to clear our screen so that when we print the summary or print the invoice record, we print it on a new screen. Then here, which is I'm setting all the data that was entered. That is the part number, the part description, the item quantity, the price per item. I'm using the setters that we defined earlier to set those things, because we have our setter for the part number, a set part description, a set quantity, and a set price per item. We're using them here now. After this whole setting process, we move to the output now. Here we print the summary. That is our actual invoice. Now in this invoice, we're gonna print the part number, we'll print the description, we'll print the quantity, we'll print the price per item, we'll print the invoice amount. Now to print the part number, we use the get part number. To print the description, we use the get part description. To print the quantity, we use the get quantity. To print the price per item, we use the get price per item. Now to print the invoice amount, we use the get invoice amount. Now everything now is clear. I think we should run the program and see the outputs. Let's run the compile and run. Let's compile and run the program. It's compiling. Just have to wait a sec. Just a moment. Yeah, there we go. Now we are required to enter a part number. Now let's enter a part number. I'm just going to enter some 5 numbers maybe. Yeah. Then we enter a description. That is, what are we buying here? We're buying maybe a hammer. And then a quantity, let's say we're buying 50 hammers. Then the price for each hammer, let's say it's 45 francs. Then there we have our invoice here. Then we have our part number, we have a description, which is the hammer, we have the quantity, we have the price per item, and also the total invoice amount. Then but let's check now what happens when the user enters a quantity that is perhaps less than 0. Let's say we're buying 100 sauce, then let's say the price maybe it's 37. There you go. The error message is printed. That is, the quantity cannot be negative. Quantity set to 0. Then invoice data members modified. That is, the quantity is actually set to 0, and the price now is 0. So this part said data invoice data members modified means that the quantity is set to 0, not the one that you entered, which is negative. That's why you don't see the negative value that you entered here. So this same goes for the price. Whenever we enter a price, let's say we enter a price that is less than 0, let's say the quantity is 27, but we mistakenly enters a price. Now as I said, that the price cannot be negative and the price value is set to 0. That is, the price data is modified and set to 0, and you can see the invoice amount is 0. Therefore, everything is working accordingly. So that's it for this project in C++. Now your homework you can do now is to try to loop this whole input process thing. That is, you must put this in a loop so that whenever a user enters the data, now as you can see now, if we enter some data, now, let's say quantity, whenever we're done entering the data, the program just exit. So what I want you to do now is go and try to loop this so that whenever we're done with this part, then it should go back to the beginning and ask the user to enter the inputs. So yeah, that's your homework. So if you have any queries, you can just leave them in the comment section. Otherwise, I think that's it for today. So yeah, thank you. See you in the next tutorial.